Poised blade. Elfric stood silently, watching Bornwolf from across the command dais of the Eotensip. His eyes still glowed with the psychic haze of the last image relayed by Gastward Cuthelm. Reports had come in from all 4 battle groups, which Elfric had dutifully received and compiled for the chapter master's review. The news was, on the surface, astonishing. The Battle of the Incoloris convoy had been a triumph, perhaps one of the greatest they could have dared imagine. An entire fleet arrayed against a single strike cruiser, and the Mariskip had not only survived, but emerged unscathed. Then there was the delaying action against the Bellum Despectus and Gladius Ecclesiae, 2 battleships forced into a standstill, followed by a diplomatic rescue mission. No losses there either, and Osric would be due commendation. And finally, the quiet seizure of the Cebus Astrum. The orbital station had come under Void Revenant control without firing a shot. Only the fortress monastery, Reliquiarium Vulnerati Martyris, cast a shadow on the light. It had been destroyed, likely by Wulfgar's hand, but the nature of the corruption discovered within was far beyond expectations. Heavy mutation, demonic signs, and possible Xenos influence. This was no mere rogue cult. And worst of all, Elfric thought grimly, was the chapter master's current plan: to fly directly into the jaws of Manifold Dawn, the most fortified forge world in the Reach, on a diplomatic mission aboard a single cruiser with only the ambiguous taint of the monastery as their proof. It was madness. He remained standing, servo joints whining softly as he adjusted to his full height, awaiting Bornwolf's reply to the compiled reports. He had already formed a suitable, cautious plan. He was quite certain the barbarian would be adrift in indecision, and must turn to Elfric and the other veterans of the Iron Hands for guidance. Beornwolf did not speak. He sat still on the throne, one gauntleted hand resting lightly on the dull blade mag locked to his thigh. His gaze lingered on the Sildathnudle at his side, the crystalline form glowing faintly in its carved bone grip. "I need a better sword," he said, mostly to himself. Elfric blinked. "Indeed, my lord, we should reunite with the fleet and—" He paused, uncertain. "What?" Bornwolf tapped the blade again. "Sword, I need a proper weapon. I've got the Sildathnudle and this plasma pistol," he added, thumbing the second holster strapped behind his thigh, a gift from Wulfgar. "But I don't have a proper close combat weapon fit for a commander." Elfric stared, mouth slightly open. "What?" Bornwolf shifted forward in his throne almost sheepishly. "I lost my old chainsword, this one." He gestured to the dull blade. "I just picked it up from the armory because it was closest to the door. We were in a hurry. I think it's time I had a proper chapter master's weapon." He turned to the bridge. "Sirherd, ideas?" "An axe," Sirherd replied without hesitation. Bornwolf looked down at the Hearthguard's sidearm. "I'll trade you the Serpenta for a plasma pistol." Sirherd stroked his clean-shaven chin. "Phexion says they explode." "This one's got an ejector spring if it overheats," Beornwolf said, awkwardly drawing it from his side. Sirherd shrugged, unholstered his Serpenta, and tossed it across the bridge. Beornwolf caught it in one hand and returned the plasma pistol with a clank. Both men looked vaguely pleased with the exchange. Beornwolf holstered the Serpenta. "Elegant, reliable, doesn't jam or melt your hand off. That's more my style." Sirherd nodded, holstering his new prize. "So now," Beornwolf continued, "I need a quarters weapon." "Axe," said Sirherd again. "You always say axe. What about a glaive? Do we have one?" Elfric was glaring now, his fingers twitching against his power stave. "My lord, we must discuss a course of action." "We are," Bornwolf said brightly. "He says axe. What do you think?" Elfric slammed the base of his stave into the deck, a flash of energy sparking from the haft. The crew paused. The bridge lights flickered, Sirherd's gaze sharpened, and the other 4 Hearthguard took a subtle step forward, shields still at their sides, but power hammers free from their maglocks. Bornwolf did not move. He kept the same relaxed smile on his face, but the light in his eyes changed. The warmth was gone. Elfric suddenly felt the press of something ancient, something iron-bound and coiled like a hunting spring behind the man's genial face. "We have evidence of Xenos infection and demonic taint," Elfric said stiffly. "And we are still heading to Manifold Dawn with only a single ship." Beornwolf remained smiling. "A single ship implies the rest are deployed elsewhere. It keeps our enemies guessing. If they move against us, they risk drawing attention from the full fleet. If they do nothing, we walk in freely. We let them try to see in the dark." Elfric looked to the others, then back. "It is illogical to proceed without the support of our full forces." Beornwulf finally stood. "Then good thing I'm not very logical." He stepped down from the dais, voice calm. "Look around, Elfric. We have no confirmation of anything beyond what we burned into that monastery. And even then, demonic signs are hardly unheard of in these fringes. Manifold Dawn does not know what we know. That is our advantage." He smiled again. "And don't expect logic from a barbarian." "Translating now, Lord," said the helmsman. Beornwulf grinned. "Excellent. Never been to Manifold Dawn before. You think they've got a gift shop? I'm on the lookout for a new axe." He walked to the absidal windows as the ship shuddered, the blast screens slowly rolling upwards with a mechanical groan. Around the bridge, the Hearthguard fanned out, each taking position beneath the timber archways framing the various command alcoves, all except Searherd, who remained beside the chapter master, silent and watchful. From the stairwell leading up from the silence chamber, a single seer ascended. She wore only a white dress, her bare feet whispering on the wooden steps. Her glowing eyes gazed into the void beyond the viewport, relaying her vision to her sisters below. Elfric glanced around the bridge. It looked less like an imperial warship than a pre-imperial sailing vessel from Nitwertha. Wood paneling, exposed beams, creaking planks beneath his boots. The air smelled of greenery and varnish. In the far corners, 2 potted trees stood beneath lumens designed to mimic sunlight, tended by a quiet servitor holding a chrome misting can. Disgraceful. It was not a warship, it was a mockery. These barbarians had dragged their culture into the void like dogs hauling a midden cart. He wouldn't be surprised if Osric flooded an entire deck just to carry the Geofon with them. He turned away in disgust. Outside, the void held 2 moons and a vast gas giant. The translation point lay far out, near Manifold Dawn's 3rd star, a trinary system. Each moon was pierced by colossal golden towers, so massive and thick they looked like bars of solid light reaching out into the black. The first of the 4 towers of Manifold Dawn. Each moon-mounted spire housed enough lance batteries and macro cannon decks to obliterate an entire fleet. Between them, invisible to the naked eye, lay the gravitic void shield arrays, impossible to bypass with warp travel or long-range weapons. They were the lock that sealed the system. Beornwulf marveled at the sight. "Magus hammer and Omnissiah anvil," said Elfric reverently. Searherd scanned the arrayed towers and batteries. "This region must have been lawless once to need so much firepower." Elfric gave a short bark of a laugh. "They're not defense platforms. Manifold Dawn orbits a trinary star system, barely stable. These towers stabilize the orbit with gravitic tethers. Without them, the stars would spiral apart." Searherd tilted his head. "Archmagos Servoprime Cognitron Feruvis must be one of the greatest artificers in the Imperium." Elfric laughed genuinely this time. "No, the towers predate him by tens of millennia, golden age of technology. Long before the fall, we study them, we revere them, but we do not understand them." "It's unnatural," whispered the seer. Elfric turned slightly. "Everything humanity does is unnatural." "Bovine dung," said Beornwulf. "Humans are living creatures. Anything we build is an extension of ourselves. Just because it's made of steel doesn't make it unhuman." Elfric looked at the chapter master, surprised, but said nothing. The seer folded her fingers into a sign. "I'll return to my sisters. The golden blades hurt my ears." She turned, vanishing down into the silence chamber. Searherd watched her go. "Hurts her ears, Lord Elfric?" Elfric nodded. "The towers interfere with psychic energy. The warp within their perimeter is dead space. No translation, no summoning. Only this one corridor between them is safe for ingress." Searherd turned to the void again. "A fortress, then, a genius defense." "Beavers," said Beornwulf coldly, "living under an upturned wrecked boat." He turned to the Vox officer. "Signal our arrival. Request clearance." Elfric looked at him for a long moment, then turned back to the viewport. In the void beyond, the black shimmered as the vast void shields opened a path, and Elfric wondered if they would leave as easily as they had come. Command deck of the Golden Crown, Archmagos Servoprime Cognitron Feruvis stormed across the command deck, red robes whipping about his armored legs. the clang of his augmetic boots echoing off the gold-leafed grating. Hundreds of crew members looked up in silent fear as he passed, their eyes fixed on their stations, unwilling to draw his gaze. "Calm yourself, Feruvus," said Matriarch Bishop Lady Seraphina, her voice as soft as silk. Feruvus turned on her, nearly tripping on his own cloak. He stabbed a trembling metal finger in her direction. "Calm? You said there would be no trouble. You said everything was in hand. You said—" Seraphina raised one elegant hand and gently moved his away, her smile serene. "I said everything would be well." She stood motionless, her golden robes catching the lumen light like flowing solar threads, serene and unreadable. Feruvus slapped her hand aside, his temper flaring. Instantly, the ecclesiarchy militia straightened, golden-armored bodies tensing. At the same moment, several Scutarii around the periphery unhooked their serpentis, their metallic hands resting on power blades. The bridge fell into taut silence. Seraphina slowly raised a calming hand to her guards. Feruvus raised his trembling fist to signal the Scutarii to stand down. From the Auspex gallery came a voice. "Confirmation. The Void Revenant strike cruiser Atensip has translated into real space beyond Omnissiah Anvil." Feruvus spun to the Auspex officer. "How many ships?" The operator paused. "Just one, Lord Magos." The Archmagos' trembling increased. "One? Then, where is the rest of the fleet?" Footsteps echoed sharply from the entranceway. The guards snapped to attention as a second robed figure entered, slender like Seraphina, but in simpler vestments of white and copper. Her hood was loose, revealing tied-back hair and a breathless face. She climbed the stairs without faltering, then stopped just short of the dais. "Confirmation from the Astropathic Choir," she said. "The scout ship reached Reliquiarium Vulnerati Martyris. They got a message off before they were destroyed." She turned to her sister. "The monastery has fallen." Feruvus let out a noise, a cross between a shriek and a laugh. "Ha! First Cibus Astrum, then the Interdiction Fleet, and now the monastery. You've lost the greatest fortress in the Dawn Sector, Lucia. And my ships." He advanced on the younger preacher, making her step back. "I'll have you in a servitor shell by sunset." He spun on Seraphina. "And now we know where their fleet is. They're already destroying our forge." He turned, bellowing toward the gunnery atrium. "Open fire on that ship. Prime my personal barge. I'm leaving this cursed system. Sensorax Centauri will give us asylum. She owes me." But in his fury he stumbled, grabbing a railing to steady himself. Lady Seraphina moved faster than anyone expected. Her staff slammed into the deck with a crack of red lightning. "Belay that order," she snapped. In a single fluid motion, she seized Feruvus by the shoulder plates and hauled his armored form off the deck. He hovered there, stunned, as she pulled him close, her voice velvet over steel. "I told you, everything is in hand." Around them, the guards stayed frozen, hands on weapons, eyes locked, uncertain. Servo Prime Feruvus. "But we need to order the fleet." Seraphina met his gaze with her radiant smile. "Do you trust me, old friend?" He blinked, then nodded slowly. Yes, of course. Everything is in hand." She set him down. His boots clanked as they touched the gold decking once more. Crew returned to their stations, pretending not to have heard the outburst. Seraphina adjusted her robes and turned to the command dais. "Lower the void shields. Allow the Eotensip passage. Stand down all vessels. Prepare the docks." The officers looked to Feruvus. He cleared his throat and waved a trembling hand. As she said, the command crew resumed their duties. Seraphina continued. "Bjornwolf is Nitworthen. He is unaccustomed to our ways. Best to send an ambassador with an honor guard. Make him feel important." Feruvus nodded quickly. "Ah, yes, Lucia, you know the barbarian. Go and greet them." Lucia glanced at her sister, who gave a subtle nod. She untied her hair, lowering her hood, then bowed to Feruvus, Seraphina, and the guard captains before turning to the doors. Her personal detachment fell into step behind her. Feruvus stepped to the wide viewports, gazing at the third star and the void beyond. "All will be well. We should greet our guests with decorum." Lady Seraphina stepped beside him, her voice a velvet blade. "A delightful idea, Servo Prime Feruvus." On the bridge of the Eotensip, the triple doors of the silence chamber parted with a hiss. The three seers emerged, their white robes trailing across the dark wood decking, faces taut with unreadable concern. Bornwolf turned to Elfric, who paused mid-step. Something brushed against his consciousness. A flicker of wrongness, like pressure behind his eyes or breath held too long. He glanced out the viewport toward the vast golden towers of Magus Hammer and Omnissiah Anvil. Power was stirring, just on the edge of perception. And then, like a wave receding, the sensation was gone. The seers bowed in unison and retreated into the darkness of the chamber. "Void down," said the Vox officer. "We've received clearance to proceed to Golden Crown Station, Lord." Bornwolf nodded silently, eyes still on the towers. Anvil, the eldest of the seers, had murmured before departing, "A ripple in the immaterium, a passing storm, nothing that threatens us." As the Eotensip powered forward into the system, Sirherd adjusted the strap on his boarding shield and moved closer to the viewport. Vast gun batteries drifted past, embedded into the gold-skinned bulk of the closest tower. On a high gantry, engineers worked under magnetic clamps, barely visible at this distance. A nearby Aegis shuttle slowly spooled coils of cable that from here looked like silk thread pulled from a distaff. The scale defied logic. The girth of the tower had to be miles across, perhaps the length of a battleship like the Reed Leoma of the Navis Astra Wigathine. "How many people could it hold?" Sirherd murmured. "You could fit Nitwortha's whole landmass inside that thing." As if hearing his thoughts, Elfric stepped beside him. "The towers are mostly autonomous. The outer skin holds the habdecks, the rest is taken up by gravitic generation machinery." "You been here before?" Sirherd asked. Elfric shook his head. "No, but the Iron Hands surveyed this system a century ago. There was talk of establishing a fortress monastery here. That was before they chose Nitwortha. I thought Astartes preferred rugged, isolated worlds. Why consider Manifold Dawn? It's the most advanced system in the Reach." "True," Elfric admitted, "but the surface of a thing is rarely what lies within." He tapped his staff against the deck. A soft blue glow bloomed at the head, and a hologram flared to life between them. A hive spire towered in the projection, its upper levels a garden of culture and light. Waxen figures moved in jerky imitation of life. Artists, preachers, scholars. Lower down, workers marched in orderly processions toward manufactorums. But farther still, the scene decayed. Ragged gangs fought for food scraps among the lower galleries. Within the underlevels, feral clans stalked the shadows, their eyes gleaming with hunger and defiance. Then from the hologram's depths, an Astartes figure emerged, robed and armored, holding out a hand to a kneeling tribal warrior who stood alone atop a mound of his fallen kin. Elfric's voice was hard. "Scratch the surface of any world and you'll find a breeding ground of barbarians." Sirherd studied the image. "So the Imperium's face is a mask placed over a realm of chaos." Elfric dismissed the projection. The light of his staff faded. "Humans without order, without the guidance of the Imperium, know only barbarism," he said. A shadow passed behind his words, and he did not resist its shape. He had seen what humans did when left without guidance. He had lived it, when on Itzical Binary 4, the light of the Imperium was deserted in the name of Nova Terran agnostical heresy. The world had burned. Bjornwolf, still watching the towers, replied without turning. "Gastwerd Elfric is a cynic. He lacks the faith of Wulfgar and Osric." Elfric stiffened. "I speak the truth. A chapter master should not be so naive. People need structure to flourish." Sirherd looked between the two officers and smiled faintly. "Put food on a man's feasting board and a roof over his head, and he'll be sanguine. The rest will take care of itself." Elfric turned, his expression sour. "What do you know of feasting boards? You never lived in a crawler. You were born beneath the open air with sea spray and sun. You never knew the hardship of Medusa." Bjornwolf turned now, quiet. "And yet," he said, "Mentor Psychonomentus chose our world to carry his gene-father's legacy. Do you think he was mistaken?" Elfric's mouth worked, but he said nothing. He turned back to the stars. Outside, the Eotensip passed rows of warships stationed in orbital tethers, golden-threaded tubes guiding their logistics. Each conduit was wide enough for shuttles and filled with robed engineers and Mechanicus personnel, crammed like ants into polished cylinders. Ahead, the Golden Crown station grew in their view, its radiant ring and vast central spire shining like a second sun, awaiting them. Suspended in low orbit above the opalescent atmosphere of Manifold Dawn's prime world, the Golden Crown gleamed like a relic of a more glorious age, one born in the twilight of the dark age of technology and clumsily restored by countless generations of the cult Mechanicus. It was a towering orbital bastion, its form rising like a scepter crowned with rings of fire and gold. The structure's central spire, forged of burnished alloys and inscribed with glimmering canticles to the Omnissiah, stretched both upward and downward, anchored by gravitic tethers to the planet's crust far below, and simultaneously piercing deep into the void with comms towers, sensor spheres, and massive antennae that whispered and screamed through the immaterium. Encircling its waist was the ring dock, a vast halo of platforms, void yards, repair gantries, and mechanized hangars. Starships drifted in and out like beetles entering a hive, some bristling with armament, others shadowed by skeletal servo rigs as they underwent repairs. Void tugs moved in slow, graceful arcs, guiding freighters, Mechanicus explorator craft, and ecclesiarchy troopships into designated bays. Each movement was controlled by thousands of servitor pilots, overseen by a lattice of cogitators and the distant voice of a tech prefect commanding from within the tower's data crypts. Beneath the outer shielding of the ring, sanctified docking gates jutted outward, shielded walkways reinforced with adamantine and gold foil, adorned with Mechanicus sigils and red glass-stained windows. Each gate was blessed by servo chant and oil-rubbed supplication. Some still bore the old Aquilae of the Emperor, while others had been replaced with the five-spoked cogwheel of the Forge's ruling creed. From high above, where the orbital command bulb of the crown loomed like an immense cogitator node, beams of golden light were directed inward across the void, guiding incoming ships with coded pulses of light and radiation, a form of ceremonial navigation known only to the ships of the Dawn sector. The dock's defensive systems, almost invisible to the untrained eye, were layered and redundant. Hidden plasma capacitors, grav-lance arrays, and fragmenting macro shells were folded neatly into the ring's understructure. One wrong trajectory, one unsanctioned broadcast, and the entire void would blossom with righteous fire. The Eotinsip approached from the outer halo, a singular shadow among the stars, its broad prow bathed in gold as it crossed into the station's controlled perimeter. On a central promenade walkway, between cyclopean mooring pillars and gilded command shrines, stood the honor guard, ecclesiarchy officers in resplendent plate, Mechanicus enforcers with weapon mechadendrites twitching in anticipation, and preacher Lucia at their center. Her white robes fluttered in the void-dampened wind, and a golden lumen behind her cast her shadow forward in greeting as the Void Revenants ship drifted to its designated berth. The docking hatch of the Eotensip groaned open, servos juddering slightly, unaccustomed to the artificial gravity lock latched onto the Golden Crown's hull. From both vessel and station, servitors and tech priests swarmed forward, chanting binary litanies as they affixed cables and pressed purity seals. On the Crown's side, a long silken cylinder was unfurled and rolled over the golden-grated floor, forming a ceremonial carpet. Preacher Lucia Gratner stood with ankles together, arms at her sides, her honor guard flanking her in perfect symmetry. Elfric emerged first. His shimmering psychic aura marked him unmistakably, a warning and invitation in one. He descended the gantry slowly, pausing at its base to scan the assembled guards. His senses extended, only to find the area was utterly still, null, dead to the warp. He didn't like it. He offered a curt nod to the preacher and stepped aside. Lucia noted the gesture but kept her expression neutral. Her guards didn't so much as twitch. A librarian meant nothing to them, at least not outwardly. Then came the thunder. The armored boots of 5 Hearthguards struck the gantry in unison as they emerged in their pale bone cataphractii plate, runes glowing faintly, shields held forward, power hammers ready. One bore an assault cannon, letting it hang loose at his side like a blunt reminder. At their center walked Bornwolf Elfwine. Lucia looked up, dwarfed by the towering figure in dull, unornamented armor. His lack of gilding surprised her. His Hearthguard appeared more regal than the chapter master himself. She bowed in silence. Her guards wavered. A few averted their visors. One shifted his footing. Bornwolf took a single step closer, towering over the preacher. Then, without warning, he spread his arms wide in Wirthan greeting. Lucia recoiled. "Don't even dare," she snapped. Her guards tensed, hands hovered on weapons. The Hearthguard didn't flinch. Bjornwolf laughed, deep and booming. He lowered his arms and opened one gauntleted hand. Between his armored fingers sat a single unbroken flower, delicate, perfectly intact, stem uncrushed. "I assure you, lady," he said, "this armor may look clumsy, but I wear it well." Elfric watched from the side. Behind his helm, his expression twisted in disbelief. Barbarian, he thought. Lucia looked from the flower to Bjornwolf's glowing blue lenses. She hesitated, then smiled faintly and took it. "Unexpected," she said aloud, then bit her tongue, surprised she had voiced it. Bjornwolf tilted his helm. "As were you. Where are your Templar militia? I expected you traveled with them always." "They are not required here," Lucia replied smoothly. "I'm on home soil." Yes, home soil." Bjornwolf looked around the golden docking chamber. "Although I thought your home was Sarathar, but with the troubles there, I suppose you're better placed here, behind Manifold Dawn's gilded walls." Lucia's eyes narrowed. "Yes, I heard you've been to my homeworld. The Void Revenants seem to be spreading their wings, and now here you are, stretching them over Manifold Dawn?" Bjornwolf smiled behind his helm. "Strange. I came to see the rulers of this forge world, and yet I find myself greeted by you. Was there a promotion I've missed?" Lucia offered a measured bow. "No promotion, but given we've met before, She caught herself. "Matriarch Bishop Seraphina and Archmagos Servoprime Cognitron Feruvis thought I would be the most appropriate envoy." Bjornwolf chuckled. "I remember you pointing bolters at me." Lucia smiled. "And you were pointing Serpentis. And yet we're both alive. A successful meeting, I'd say." She gave him a weak smile and gestured to the blast doors. "You will be received in the grand hall." They walked. The corridor beyond was cathedral-like, ribbed with arched gold and latticed glass. Beyond the walls, space stretched in every direction. Bjornwolf activated Unit Vox. "How are we doing?" Elfric butted in before Sirherd could reply. "Doing? We are Astartes, angels of death, and you pass pleasantries with a possible heretic? You even gave her a flower." His tone snapped like a lash. Bjornwolf calmly cut Elfric's Vox channel. The librarian's furious words scrolled across his HUD in crisp High Gothic. He ignored them. Sirherd answered, "Pollen scan is dispersing faster than expected. Golden Crown must have significant convection flow. But I've mapped 20% of the structure so far. Inner security stations, servitor maintenance paths, embedded access cores. It's a maze, but I'm inside." Elfric's Vox was re-enabled. "You're scanning the Golden Crown? That's impossible. Not even the Iron Hands could do it. It's shielded against auspex and deep scan tech." Bjornwolf grinned. "That's the thing about Iron Hands and barbarians. An Iron Hand would never think to use pollen. Flowers are offensively biological, after all." Elfric said nothing. The barbarian had just solved a century-old Mechanicus riddle without even trying. The meeting hall was vast, easily the central nexus of the Golden Crown station. Its domed ceiling stretched high overhead, paneled in sections of shimmering auramite and retractable shutters. Beneath their feet, the floor was a single immense sheet of reinforced crystal, so clear it seemed they stood upon the void itself. Through it, 50 miles below, the silver expanse of the moon curved like a scythe. Beyond it shimmered Manifold Dawn, a world wrapped in gold and crowned in flame, its twin suns never setting. Bjornwolf wondered if the dome above them was also glass, shuttered only to dim the light of the ever-turning stars. On Nitwertha, the long dark ruled half the year. But here, darkness was an alien thing. Even night bowed to industry. They were not alone. Servoprime Cognitron Feruvis stood at the center of the hall, flanked by senior tech priests, data seers, and other robed dignitaries. To his right stood a block of administratum prelates in formal yellow vestments. At their center was Matriarch Bishop Lady Seraphina, unchanged since the funeral of Queen Hildilith. Preacher Lucia Gratner had crossed the chamber to stand beside her. Around them were ranks of Scitarii and Ecclesiarchy guards, and beyond even them, a ceremonial detachment of Fraternus Templars, heavily armed, silent. The Hearthguard stepped out first, spreading out with the slow, deliberate weight of cataphracti plate. Bone-white armor etched with runes of death and protection. Power hammers hung at their sides. One bore an assault cannon, held low but primed. They made no threats. They needed none. Elfric walked at Bjornwolf's left, his presence a quiet glow of restrained power. Sirherd was at his right, eyes flicking behind a helm lens display. I am scanning hidden servitor alcoves, Sir Herd murmured over Vox. Heavy weapon systems, 80 in total across 3 tiers. 500 troops at ingress corridors. The pattern is defensive or preparatory. Bornwolf nodded once. It seems they expect trouble. We have walked into a trap, Elfric said. The chapter master pulled off his helm with a hiss of released pressure, handing it to Sir Herd without breaking stride. He walked ahead, his footfalls echoing like iron on a cathedral floor. The Void Revenants bring you greetings, Archmagos, he called across the hall, his voice rich even. News of your great works travels faster than any warp echo. Cognitron Feruvis stepped forward, chin high. His augmetics bristled with quiet irritation. Your arrival was unannounced. We heard you had gone to Sarathar and made treaty with Ur Council forces there. He straightened. My forge is loyal to Terra and to the High Lords. I trust you are not here to test that allegiance. Bornwolf offered both hands, palms open, unguarded. We are Astartes. We do not govern. We defend. It is not my place to speak of politics, only to keep mankind from extinction. Feruvis narrowed his optics. Then what were you doing on Sarathar? Oh, Bornwolf said casually, we executed their ruling council. Gasps rippled through the gathered functionaries. A few took stumbling steps backward, trying to disappear into the crowd. Even some of the Skitarii helmets twitched slightly. Feruvis looked aghast. You had no authority to. We acted under Nova Terran writ, Elfric cut in coldly. Sarathar falls within their jurisdiction. They exercised lawful recourse and summoned the aid of the Astartes. Their mandate is legitimate. Bjornwolf turned, just slightly. His eyes, sky blue and ancient, flicked toward Elfric with quiet reprimand. His posture did not change, but a subtle tension passed through the room. Sirherd exchanged a glance with one of the Hearthguard. A slight movement. The warrior adjusted his stance. A minor, almost imperceptible tilt that placed the Gastweird squarely in line of fire. Elfric said nothing more. Though the warp felt dimmed here, dulled by null wards and layered static, he could feel the sudden crackle of hostility. The raw disapproval of the Hearthguard, the quiet, simmering wrath of the chapter master. He lowered his eyes and stood in silence. Bjornwolf broke the tension with a slight smile. Do not worry, Archmagos. We are not here for bloodshed. We are here for understanding. The last time I encountered Preacher Lucia, we nearly killed each other. Yet she stands here, and so do I. He looked to Lucia. She met his gaze evenly, her expression fixed. You executed a ruling council, Feruvis said again, tone laced with forced calm. And you expect that to be diplomatic? Beornwolf shrugged. No, I expect it to be remembered. Matriarch Bishop Lady Seraphina glanced toward her retinue, sensing how completely Bornwolf now commanded the room's attention. The Archmagos beside her seemed momentarily struck dumb. She extended a delicate, jeweled hand. Chapter Master, she said with composed grace. As I understand it, you are here to resolve some diplomatic tension between Manifold Dawn and your chapter. Yet I know of no such conflict. We hold no grievance with the Void Revenants, nor, to my knowledge, with your homeworld. Bornwolf nodded toward Sirherd, who stepped forward and opened his hand. A handful of hollow discs clattered across the glass floor, spinning outward in all directions. Each one emitted a bright pulse of light, projecting flickering holograms above them, images of warships conducting attack runs on freighters and Karabath-class haulers. Each aggressor bore unmistakable incolorous markings. Data tags flickered into existence beside the vessels, showing verification stamps, time codes, and ident signals. The room gasped as the destruction played out. Servo-Prime Cognitron Feruvis buried his face in one metal hand. Lady Seraphina, however, stepped forward, distorting a projection as she passed through it. Really, Chapter Master, she said smoothly. Manifold Dawn has been aware of such raids along our border with Incoloris. I assure you, our fleets have been actively engaging in anti-pirate operations. Feruvis looked up suddenly, seizing the opportunity. Yes, of course. We've suffered losses too. Pirate attacks destroyed several of our own ships as well. Bjornwolf gave a single nod. Then Archmagos Piravox will be pleased to hear he has your full support, as will Archmagos Damia Voratrix. Feruvis blinked, uncertain. Yes, he said slowly, clearly unsure what he had just agreed to. Bjornwolf walked toward one of the nearest holograms, which showed a freighter melting under sustained lance fire. The footage replayed endlessly. He turned his helm slightly toward the gathered officials. As the Emperor's Astartes, the Void Revenants have a solemn duty to suppress piracy. It is our charge to keep the Emperor's peace. Do you agree? Of course, Ferruvis replied quickly. Preacher Lucia was watching warily. Lady Seraphina, too, now seemed pensive. Good, Beornwulf said, voice still calm. Because under my oath to Incaloris, the Hālgengas flotilla intercepted and destroyed a raider fleet, including 3 capital vessels. Ferruvis's bionic eye twitched, auto-adjusting to the sudden flood of data. Yes, good, he said, voice faltering. Bjornwolf moved between the holograms, letting the flickering light play off his unadorned armor. Of course, he continued, we interrogated several of the captured crew. They claimed to be receiving fuel and logistical support from one of Manifold Dawn's own outposts. He turned slowly. Xebus Astrum, we seized the station. A heavy silence fell over the hall. Ferruvis's mouth worked soundlessly. Regrettably, Bjornwolf added, Magos Menton Duralix was killed in the fighting. We were unable to question him. The station, it seems, had fallen to a cult. The local ecclesiarchy staff were burned alive. We managed to rescue only a few survivors. Ferruvis had raised both hands and several mechadendrites in a clumsy gesture of appeasement. He now hesitated, mouth still opening and closing without sound. Lucia glanced sharply between Bjornwolf, her sister, and the stricken Archmagos. Her mind was racing. Bjornwolf's tone remained pleasant, even conversational. Naturally, some of the survivors still believed they were acting under Manifold Dawn's authority, likely a case of misplaced loyalty, broken command chains, confusion in the fog of war, but rest assured they are being well treated and will be returned to your custody in time. Lady Seraphina gave a slight nod. Thank you, Lord Bjornwolf. Ferruvis looked from Seraphina to the chapter master. He nodded in turn, his expression a twisted mask of nerves, his metal fingers visibly trembling. Preacher Lucia, still guarded, finally spoke. Thank you for your service, Astartes. The Emperor clearly watches over us through your hands. But on behalf of Manifold Dawn, I must bring to your attention that we have been aware of rogue elements operating within our 5-tower cult. There is a monastery. Cognitron Ferruvis looked at her with wide eyes, caught off guard. But Lady Seraphina raised a hand, calming him without a word. She took up the thread of the statement smoothly. It is in the border regions, she said, her voice mild, and has not been paying its tithe. Bjornwolf looked genuinely surprised, then clapped his hands together. Ferruvis nearly swallowed his tongue as he flinched violently. Ah! I was wondering how to approach the subject, Bjornwolf said with a slight bow toward Lucia. We followed one of the raider cruisers after the engagement. It docked with a monastery, Reliquiarium Vulneratae Martyris. A firefight ensued. The battle was intense. He paused. You must understand, the Flot Geofon Hālgengas is an Astartes battle fleet, built for destruction, not diplomacy. I am afraid my ships utterly obliterated the monastery. Ferruvis let out what may have been a sigh, half of relief, half of strained effort to conceal it. He quickly masked it as a low, affected groan of concern. Lucia nodded solemnly, acknowledging the implication without challenging it. Lady Seraphina tilted her head, her voice low and composed. Then I hope any loyal to the cult perished in the grace of the Mother and he who sits upon the throne. Bjornwolf shook his head gently. I'm afraid by the time of our arrival, any loyal ministorum were already long dead. In the ruins we found bodies, many of them Xenos tainted. It seems the monastery had fallen to heresy. They were worshipping something else. Oh, Seraphina said, voice cool. Yes, a 6-limbed abomination of Xenos origin. They were no longer merely heretical. They were feral, cannibalistic, monsters in all but name. From his belt, Bjornwolf produced a sealed reliquary box. From within, he withdrew a basalt-carved idol, roughly hewn, squat, bloated, with 2 legs and 4 arms, the upper pair ending in sickle-like talons. Its maw was bestial, wide, and slavering. He handed it to Lady Seraphina. My men found this among the wreckage, one of their idols. I do not suppose you've seen anything like it? We would refer this to the Inquisition, but in their absence, we are doing what we can to warn the faithful across the Reach. Seraphina took the object, holding it at the edges as though afraid it might scald her hands. She turned it once, her eyes narrowing. What a horrible thing, she murmured. Clearly some heretic's fantasy. No true creature could evolve in such a form. But for a moment, Elfric, watching from the sidelines, thought he saw a flicker of something. Unease, recognition, cross her face. She handed the idol to Lucia, who turned it over in her hands and then offered it to Ferruvis. The Archmagos recoiled instinctively, waving his mechadendrites in protest. Lucia passed it instead to Serherd, who bowed and returned it to Bornwolf's reliquary. "We thank you nonetheless," Seraphina said, her tone measured. "If you see more of these horrors, alert us at once." Bjornwolf inclined his head. "Of course. And with that, I must inform you, Cibus Astrum has been taken under our protection." A stillness fell across the chamber. The navy captains of the Dawn Fleet, arrayed in their finery along the edge of the gallery, looked at one another, confusion giving way to rising alarm. One began whispering into a vox bead, another stiffened, visibly tensing as if expecting combat. Bjornwolf continued, slowly and clearly. "We will maintain the border between Incoloris and Manifold Dawn. Cibus Astrum is strategically vital, and it is now under the protection of the Navis Astra Wigathine." Lady Seraphina kept her composure. Ferruvis, however, did not. "You are annexing Cibus Astrum?" he croaked. "I would not put it quite like that," Bjornwolf said with a casual shrug. "But yes, in effect. And given the need to patrol the region, Nitwertha will be expanding our territory. 15 star systems along the Arcana Inclusium border will fall under our custodianship, with new outposts positioned throughout the Queen's Way trade route." The Dawn captains erupted in low voices, a ripple of outrage and confusion moving through their ranks. Ferruvis began to bluster, fists clenched. "You can't just— This is our border! With Incoloris! With Nitwertha!" Bjornwolf spoke over him, addressing Seraphina as if Ferruvis weren't present. "This expansion will make the region safer for pilgrims. Ecclesiarchy convoys will be given priority lanes through the Reach, fully protected by our third company." Ferruvis's voice cracked through a vox-augmented screech. "You annex our entire border with Nitwertha and Incoloris? You overreach, you barbarian fishbowl-dwelling mud-dwellers!" A flickering hololith was kicked over by his flailing augmetic foot, sending sparks across the floor. Seraphina snapped her fingers once, sharply. Ferruvis turned on her, apoplectic. "Do you hear what this upstart is saying?" Her voice was ice. "The Void Revenants are securing the border on behalf of the Dawn Ecclesiarchy." The words landed like a blade. Ferruvis faltered, his expression turning from rage to disbelief. "Ecclesiarchy?" he echoed. From the far end of the room, Elfric watched it unfold, his mind racing. He looked from Serherd to the chapter master, understanding dawning. This was planned. Serherd whispered into his vox, transmitting over the chapter surf channel. Bjornwolf turned again, as if the next revelation were a casual afterthought. "I have spoken with Deacon Absalon," he said. "He has graciously agreed to deploy 5-tower Ministorum priests into Arcana Inclusium, to any world willing to host one. Furthermore, Nitwertha will house a small monastery aboard one of our aerorships, guarded by the Geofon Hālgengas." At that moment, the doors at the rear of the chamber opened. The 5-tower cultists, re-educated on Nitwertha, entered under chapter surf guard, escorted by Mechanicus Scitari. Their humble robes and freshly sanctified demeanor set them apart from the more opulent clergy present. They began to mingle, subtly, quietly, with the others. Lucia watched in silence. Lady Seraphina gave Bjornwolf a wide, knowing smile, and made the sign of the 5 towers toward him. Ferruvis looked between them all, trembling, and then, finally, smiled. But it was a manic, fractured thing, his hands still shaking. Matriarch Bishop Lady Seraphina gave a serene nod, still holding her proud expression, though her eyes flicked toward the collapsed Ferruvis and the silent, seething Dawn Navy captains. The room was divided now, between those too stunned to speak and those carefully aligning themselves behind the winning side. Bjornwolf stepped forward once more, arms clasped behind his back in a posture of calm finality. "My duties here are concluded," he said. "We have rooted out the source of the corruption at Cibus Astrum, exposed the Xeno's influence, and ensured that pilgrims along the Queen's Way will have protection as they pass into Incoloris and beyond. The Reach will no longer be lawless." He turned to Lucia and gave a slight bow of the head. "Preacher Lucia, we thank you for your welcome and for your honesty. The ecclesiarchy here has acted with grace and wisdom. Lucia bowed in return, her voice low but resolute. And you, chapter master, have done the Emperor's work. I pray the peace you bring endures. Beornwulf looked to Seraphina next. Matriarch Bishop, your guidance has been invaluable. I trust the ecclesiarchy will maintain its vigilance. She gave him a wide smile, carefully veiled with diplomacy. The Mother sees all, chapter master. May the 5 towers shine upon your path. Sir Herd stepped to Beornwulf's side, nodding once. The Eotensip is making ready. Auxiliary ships have completed resupply. Vox confirms all Geofon Hālgengas elements are aboard. Very well, Beornwulf replied. He turned, offering a final glance to the assembled figures in the Golden Hall. The stunned captains of the Dawn Fleet, the muttering tech adepts, and the silent priests watching as their doctrine shifted beneath them. Void Revenants, withdraw, he commanded simply. With that, the Astartes present fell into orderly motion. Seerherd gave a sharp command over Vox, and the Revenants began to leave the chamber in silence, armored boots echoing against the glass floors. The serfs and Skitari flanking the 5-tower cultists turned as well, escorting them out behind the Astartes. Behind them, Cognitron Feruvis remained seated, a tremor in his limbs, muttering scrap code to himself in confused loops. No one moved to help him. Outside, the gantries buzzed with activity as the massive form of the Eotensip loomed beyond the cathedral's void glass, its blue-armored bulk reflecting the fading gold light of the system's sun. The Void Revenants were already boarding by the time Beornwulf stepped onto the docking ramp. Sir Herd's voice came again, crisp through the Vox. All personnel accounted for, standing by for departure. Beornwulf turned as Preacher Lucia approached the embarkation ramp. Elfric stood quietly nearby, watching. Ahead, Sir Herd had already disappeared into the ship to begin launch preparations. Lucia stopped halfway up the ramp. Beornwulf took a few steps down to meet her, pausing just above. I came to wish you a safe journey, she said, offering a faint smile across her pale face. Beornwulf shook his head slowly. No, you didn't. You came to make sure we left. She sighed, conceding the point. I came to ask what game you're playing. I asked you once before to allow the 5 towers into your world and you refused. Now, not only do you annex 15 systems and take Cebus Astrum, but you invite us in. Why? Beornwulf looked into her sharp brown eyes. Something is growing on Sarathar. Something dangerous. Something that may threaten the Imperium if left unchecked. And now we found the same rot here in Dawn space. Lucia's smile faltered, becoming something quieter, more genuine. You've been to Sarathar, she said softly. You've seen my homeworld. She nodded to herself. We fled from it. Yes, Beornwulf said plainly. That's why I didn't shoot you the moment I saw you. She let out a surprised laugh, then bowed slightly. Thank you, she said with mock courtesy. Then her tone grew solemn. You took the Imperial Eagle, but you don't fight for the Imperium. You fight to protect your world. I understand that. I lost mine to an out-of-control cult. Here, on Manifold Dawn, I fight to protect my new home, because I know what loss is. She stepped closer, speaking low, so only an Astartes could hear. And Beornwulf, if you hold it too tightly, it'll slip through your fingers. Beornwulf stared at her a moment, then gave a short nod. You and your sister only have words to defend your world. I have a chapter of angels. Lucia looked away, her voice soft with something like regret. Words are more powerful than any weapon. I just watched them conquer this hall. She turned and walked down the gantry without another word. Beornwulf stepped back inside, and the docking doors slammed shut behind him. She did not look back. Elfric stepped beside him, arms folded, brow furrowed. What did she mean? Beornwulf didn't answer right away. He stared at the sealed hatch, lost in thought. Then, quietly, I came here with 1 ship and 6 Astartes, and I won a war. He turned toward the corridor leading to the bridge, but paused. From his belt, he pulled a reliquary. Elfric accepted it with a glance, then froze. Nestled inside was the black stone idol, fat, bloated, with 6 limbs and a monstrous face, just like the visions Grimhelm had described. This isn't from the fleet, Elfric said. We haven't seen this one. Where did it come from? Beornwulf didn't look back. Sarathar, he said, and walked on. The vast docking platform trembled as the Eotensip's engines rumbled to life, heat haze distorting the air. Girders groaned, servo struts adjusted, and lights along the gantry flickered amber as the strike cruiser prepared to breach the void. The vessel's hull shimmered under layered shield fields, the proud sigil of the Void Revenants, glinting blue beneath the golden light of Manifold Dawn's orbital ring. Matriarch Bishop Lady Seraphina stood at the viewport with Preacher Lucia Gratner at her side, both silhouetted against the light. The moment was still, but heavy with tension. "They know," Seraphina said quietly, her voice like velvet over steel. Lucia nodded slowly, arms crossed beneath her robes. "Perhaps, but they can prove no link to Manifold Dawn. We sent all the most obvious to the monastery." Her voice dipped lower, "and the Revenants destroyed it for us. All the evidence, gone." Seraphina's expression remained inscrutable, but her lips tightened. "We must tread carefully. We cannot let what happened on Sarathar happen here. That sort of attention draws fire." Behind them, Servo Prime Cognitron Ferruvis could be heard cackling as he addressed a pair of junior tech adepts. His voice, though modulated, carried its oily arrogance through the metal chamber. He turned and approached the two women, still chuckling. Seraphina leaned closer to Lucia and said, "Odious little man." Lucia gave the smallest nod of agreement. Matriarch Bishop, Ferruvis greeted them with a too-wide smile, servo skull bobbing behind his shoulder. "I told you to remain calm. And look, everything has resolved itself beautifully." "Beautifully?" Seraphina arched an eyebrow. "You mean to say you had a plan?" "Oh yes," Ferruvis said with a lopsided grin. "Without their precious chapter master and their head librarian, the Revenants will throw themselves into endless border wars, pirates, Xenos, whatever they can find. They'll burn out or be scattered. Then we retake Cebus Astrum, and then," he leaned forward, "the entire Arcana Inclusium is ours again." There was a beat of silence. Then Seraphina moved. With a sudden lurch, she seized Ferruvis by the throat guard of his robes and slammed him against the steel bulkhead with enough force to rattle the lumen fixtures. The Servo Prime wheezed, mechanical limbs flailing. "What have you done?" she hissed, her golden eyes burning. "Tell me, Ferruvis," he coughed, augmetics clicking, eyes darting. "What you failed to do." Lucia's face paled. The sisters exchanged a long look, silent understanding flashing between them. Then, without a word, Lucia turned and sprinted from the deck, vestments trailing behind her, as the Eotensip rose on columns of fire and roared into the stars.